My name is Bob Fine. I've worked on Wall Street for nearly 30 years. I'm going to talk about my experience leveraging the Wolfram ecosystem to develop a number of tools which automate the process of operating over large data sets. I'm Bob Fine. Pleasure to be here. I was thought for the longest time I was speaking tomorrow at 8:30, and then I realized a few days ago I'm the first one, so we said nobody's left the conference yet. So I'm going to talk about my experiences on Wall Street specifically, and the way I would term it is using Mathematica and the Wolfram language as a scripting language in order to create some automation tools that operate over large data sets, and specifically in my case, Bloomberg data sets. So I'll cover a little bit about my background. I'll talk about the project. I'll talk about some general thoughts about Wolfram doing business on Wall Street. So I've been in the municipal finance industry on Wall Street for about 30 years. The municipal finance is its own little kind of world on Wall Street. It's part of the fixed income world. Everything is tax exempt bonds, and the clients are municipal issuers. So that includes mostly cities, towns, municipalities, and then some other entities like hospitals and airports. I worked over the years for Prudential Beige, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, a bond insurance startup, which was a very interesting experience. I was not your kind of, I wasn't the guy going out and doing the glad handling and doing the shaking hands. I was more of a quantitative guy. And in the municipal finance world, that means dealing with cash flows, structured cash flows, and being able to structure them and being able to calculate various costs, various returns, cost of capital, essentially IRRs. For most of my career, I did this in Excel. I was very good. I was probably one of the top 5 people in the municipal finance industry in terms of quantitative structuring abilities in Excel. It was kind of well known across the industry. But Excel is very kind of constraining and frustrating, as you may be aware. And so I was introduced to Mathematica by a guy who became a close friend and a mentor about 9 or 10 years ago at the bond insurance startup. This guy was a brilliant guy. He was chief technology officer at Citigroup. Right now he's chief technology officer at one of the main business lines of bank in New York. And he said, for what we need to do with the intellectual property, and I at the bond insurance company, and I was kind of shepherding the intellectual property, you, meaning me, need Mathematica. I did not have a computer science background, but I know in my head kind of all this stuff that needed to be done with the operating over the cash flows. And he said Mathematica is the way we're going to go, and he was there. He helped me, and so here I am today, whatever that means. So in municipal finance, this is kind of framing the problem. It's driven by a marketing cycle, which means that the bankers are going out and touching clients, making presentation to clients, kind of at least 2 or 3 times a year. And in order to do that, they need pitch books. And in order to do that, they need to have a comprehensive, very detailed, very accurate understanding of the client's outstanding debt. And then the main kind of selling point in the client may have new money needs, which means they have to issue debt for new projects. The other big source of revenue in the municipal finance departments up through the end of the year when Congress amended the law it's called advance refunding. It's essentially you're refunding debt. The issuer is getting savings, and the broker dealer or the underwriter is getting a fat fee for issuing new bonds. And the current state and the state for the last 30 years has been all this work gets done by lots of warm bodies, young kids, prying data out of primary disclosure documents, working kind of, like seamstresses in Excel spreadsheets, maintaining Excel spreadsheets in a very diverse, unsecured, Windows file system. And these kids were in heaven. They didn't want to change. So I have the term my cyborg ratio, machine, the cyborg's half part man, half machine. So in the current environment, more or less, it's kind of the manual labor is 90%, the machine labor is 10%. So my objective was taking my Mathematica skills, because after the bond insurance experience, I came back to a couple of smaller investment banks doing muni finance, and I convinced them that I should write this code that'll kind of automate some of the workflows, and so the idea was to have some sort of application that would take data, and all the data that they were getting out of kind of hard copies or maintaining in Excel spreadsheets was in Bloomberg. So you can, so the data source was Bloomberg. The goal was to pull that in, have code operate over it, do all the analyses, and then create schedules, client-ready schedules. So that literally I would just hit the button, and this thing wouldn't kind of run in a couple of seconds. Sometimes, depending on the size of the data set, it could take 5 or 10 minutes or even longer. But once the button was pressed, I just sat back and let the thing run. Or, that was my goal. And just to reiterate, I've got this comment at the bottom of the slide. It's very difficult to market workflow automation into certain Wall Street environments, and particularly Wall Street environments where compensation is driven by revenue production as opposed to managing a P&L. So muni finance compensation is revenue production. So I was alone. I had no other resources allocated to me. So based on that, and based on my knowledge of Wolfram, I said, okay, I'm going to use Wolfram to get me from beginning to end. Again, even so far as pulling the Bloomberg data using Bloomberg Link as opposed to the Bloomberg Excel API. Both are doable, but the Bloomberg Link is very fast and very efficient. Again, so the Bloomberg source used Wolfram functions as operators, and then the final output, the design was generated using report template functionality, which I don't know if you've had any experience with that. It's very interesting, and in certain respects very powerful. And again, one click runs all, and then the end user ready data output is PDFs and HTMLs. So this thing, if you want, it could go right to clients. So let me kind of dig in a little bit and kind of show you kind of some components and the workflow. So this is a small sample of the Bloomberg data sets that I was operating over. And again, this is not just this data for presentation purposes coming from the Excel API. But you can see that there are, and the columns go to further to the right. There are about 40 fields. And again, the rows, it's completely scalable. The one thing to notice is in the fourth column, series ID. That's critical because in municipal finance, you've got series of bonds, and a series of bonds is made up of individual maturities, 20 or 30 individual maturities. So I was working over individual maturities and series of bonds. So that, and this is provided by Bloomberg, that series identifier is what allowed me to kind of do the groupings I needed, to do the calculations. So here's a sample output number one. And I apologize, this is a cut and paste from Adobe into PowerPoint. And you obviously don't need to see the individual numbers or the detail to kind of get a sense, first of all, of how this is laid out, that it's very neat and then kind of published. It's published like it's grouped. The report template does all the groupings, and a report like this could go 70 pages with the blocking out the issuers. And this particular one it shows an issuer. Hamilton County is an issuer, and then these are the series under that issuer, and then within each of the series there are individual bonds. And again, this sample you're looking at is just Bloomberg data rearranged and formatted on the page. Now, this output takes the Bloomberg data we just saw and analyzes the string descriptions of what the purpose of each of the series. And from a tax perspective, and the goal is to kind of pick out the series and the bonds that are advanced refundable. And what's refundable is governed by a very complicated set of IRS rules. So though you can impute what bonds are refundable by looking at the Bloomberg descriptions. And so I used a piecewise function and a set of parameters to look at the descriptions, and then if a bond or series met the requirements to be refunded, a one would go into the first bucket, and there were other kind of buckets as well that were important. So this now is an analysis. So the program had sorted through or filtered out all of the bonds that the algorithm previously had determined were refundable. And so on a bond by bond basis, a row by row basis, the code operates over each of the bonds to determine a savings amount for each of the bonds based on input which reflects current market condition. There's a lot of use of financial bond. It really has to do with pricing the bonds at various rates and looking at the difference. But again, sample output 3 is all analysis. And then sample output 4 is a little different in that it takes the results of 3 within an issuer, and it combines them all and looks at cash flows representing a fact pattern where all of those bonds would be refunded kind of at once as a single portfolio. So again, this is stuff that issuers, the bankers look at day in and day out. It's just bread and butter stuff. On the one hand, it was kind of being done by hand, and here it's just done with one click of the button. This is my wrapper function. This is the one function that sits in I had visions for kind of moving this forward in terms of a UI or being able for other people to use it, but at this current point, this is a function that sits in the notebook. These variables are assigned values at the top of the notebook. There's an initialization function where I call I got about 8 packages running, having code in it that this function relies on. I initialize those, and then I run this. And so what's happening here is the first few variables like banker, issuer name, all the inputs and the outputs are sitting in a very kind of rudimentary Windows Server file system. So these variables will populate path names that I've got in the code, so it'll know where to go and grab the input and push the output to. There are some inputs, some variables that control that have to do with dates and control the market information that needs to be pulled in, and then sets a start date for the analysis. And then some other switches which allow me to control exactly what reports I'm printing out, whether or not I'm going to pull in a Bloomberg data set that comes from Bloomberg Mathematica Bloomberg link or an Excel file, and things like that, which, depending on, what I was doing and when. Having control over this certainly controlled the time it took to do an analysis. So if I didn't need to do a full-blown analysis, or some of it was already done, I could cut down the processing time by turning off some reports. To get a little bit in the weeds, I dealt with the Bloomberg data as structured data sets. Allows you to do the group by, join across, very efficient mapping structures. So if you do a group by on my series, then that creates implicitly submatrices, and those can be mapped individually. Those elements can individually be mapped to functions, and then report templates. And again, you set up your template in advance, and then you just give it the template. Generate document is the key driving function. You give it a template name. You've created the association based on the matrices that were created by the functionality operating over the Bloomberg datasets. Piecewise was an important function I used. Financial bond, and then if you look at kind of the structure of a municipal bond series, it's very much it is a system of linear equations. So in Excel, you essentially are solving from the back end. You're bootstrapping from the back end. Here, using linear solve and linear programming, setting the problem up, taking the data, and then setting up abstract matrices that then ran through linear solve or linear programming was just a very efficient way to deal with this. So I'm down to about 6 or 7 minutes. Marketing WE, the Wolfram ecosystem on Wall Street. I put this slide together over the weekend, and then listening to Stephen last night kind of came away kind of thinking somewhat differently. I mean, from listening to Stephen last night, the competition worth caring about is neither MATLAB or Python. The issue, I think, and I was kind of overheard this in some conversations last night and this morning. The issue is that there's been, Mathematica, the Wolfram ecosystem is just a great system, but there's no awareness of it on Wall Street. I would have to explain to people what when I was explaining what I was doing, or saying, well, I'm using Mathematica, I'm using the Wolfram language. Have you heard of it? No. Well, first I was saying, well, it's like MATLAB, and they've heard of MATLAB. And now at least I can say, after this experience and seeing how close, how similar this process I did would be to writing the same code in Python, I can say, yeah, it's like Python. but it's kind of more efficient. It's faster to develop. You know, you don't have to go kind of all over the internet, you know, looking for libraries. It's all contained, and that's the big issue. That's the big issue. I'd say, you know, it's not up to me to tell, you know, Stephen what his goals and objectives are. But I would say if he wants to get to 2,000 employees as opposed to current 8, he has to be more efficient and kind of picking a spot, either picking a spots or just getting the word out. And Wall Street companies will pay a premium all day long for value. I don't think any of us in the room doubts that the value that's in Mathematica and the Wolfram ecosystem. So, take questions. Yeah. Well, I don't think that's the question. I think, well, I guess one way to answer that is I would like more people to know it. And, so that I'm not, the only one doing it. You've got to have more users out there, more people that understand that they're trained in it, that, so if I do this and leave a company, there are other people that can take it over. I mean, I was pretty lucky. If somebody were kind of, thinking carefully about this, they may have said, "No, Bob, if you leave, who's gonna run this?" But they didn't say that. But that's an issue to make my life easier. I mean, again, it's marketing, branding, kind of having a very kind of easy to grasp message, and just getting the word out more effectively so people know what it is. No. Well, I never used Excel link. It doesn't work. The latest, I don't know if it changed within the last 10 months, but it doesn't. Excel link doesn't work in 64-bit Excel. And just, I mean, you've still got to kind of be able to write your functionality in Mathematica. No. I mean, I was exporting the output of generate documents as PDFs and HTML. So if you wanted to work in Excel, you just you can copy and paste the HTML in Excel. And there were also some tables that I exported unformatted directly to an XLS file. So I don't see that Excel link, and again, I never really got my head around it. I always knew it was out there, and I always kind of said, well, I'm gonna focus on it, but I never did. Right. Yeah. I think I would argue that, I mean, I think most of the jargon is muni finance jargon. I mean, yeah, right. I mean, the issuer name is coming directly from Bloomberg. Right. Yeah. Right. But everything else is muni finance speak. So yeah, I don't think that's an issue for, once you're in that world. Yeah, right, yeah. Right. Well, a lot, right? And it was never kind of thought of that way. I mean, again, what I did is very rudimentary. You really need a database to kind of, store the Bloomberg data, and then there are legal issues there, and then push it back out, and then take the results and push it back into a database. And it really ought to go to a report writer, right? And it really ought to sit in the cloud and be accessible from within the firm, via a URL, kind of more web-based. And then the other thing that I started working on is using because I had an enterprise version of Finance Platform, which comes with the Bloomberg link, and it also comes with the enterprise CDFs. I don't know if you've had experience with enterprise CDFs, but they're really the way to kind of package what I've done as an application that other people in the organization can use. So it would open up, the enterprise CDF allows you to take external data. In other words, it allows you to reach out to the file system, to the Bloomberg data, and pull it in, pull different versions of the Bloomberg data in. The issue there is it just becomes very kind of cumbersome to write a really neat kind of clean front end that people kind of are comfortable sitting in and using. And I never quite got that far. I'm done? All right. Thank you.